Oh, okay. So no, that's this one here. So can you guys see the presentation? You guys,
Yeah,
okay,
all good.
cool.
Yep,
Yeah.
we got it.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, cool. So yeah, just a little bit about me. So I originally started in the airline industry back in the 1990s, working for a company called US Airways, which is now American. They were bought by American in 2013, I think it was. I had left long before that, but that was my first kind of entry into the industry as a college intern, actually. And then I worked for Air France for a couple of years in the New York office. Then I started a newsletter called Airline Weekly after graduate school, which after 16 years, I think it was, I sold it to a company called Skift. I briefly left Skift, but I'm actually now back at Skift. So that's one change for those of you that attended my last talk. That's one change, is I am following the industry as my full-time job again. So you can, and I should say, yeah, we're going to, of course, talk about JetBlue and Spirit today, but especially because it's, just a few of us, so informal. You guys are welcome to ask about, anything that's going on in the airline industry, or for that matter, you can ask. I like to say I'm an expert in three things: the airline industry, the U.S. economy, and baseball. So if you guys have any questions about any of those three, you can ask. But yeah, of course, we're gonna sort of mostly focus on JetBlue Spirit. So that is a little bit about me. I like to start these things with just a quick note on sort of nature of airline economics, with the headline here being that it is very, very difficult industry. I mean, it's just hard to make money in the airline industry. And I listed a few of these reasons why. You just need a lot of labor, just very people intensive. You need a lot of capital to just buy these really expensive airplanes. And then it's, anytime you pretty much look at the news, anything that's going wrong in the world, it's probably going to affect the airlines in a bad way. So, we all know what's happened with the pandemic, which created the worst airline industry crisis in history. But you can, anytime there's a recession, anytime there's an energy shock, anytime there's a war, I mean, it's always, the airlines are always on the front line. So it's a very, very difficult business. And besides that, there's just a lot of fixed costs involved. So what we see now, in fact, I was talking a little bit earlier today to some colleagues about China. We actually did a podcast, the Airline Weekly podcast. If you're curious, learning more about this, you can subscribe to that. But we were talking about China, and there's cities there that are completely locked down. So there's no air travel for a period of time, and so there's no revenue coming in. But you still kind of got to pay your workers. You still have to pay your aircraft leases. You still have to pay your airport. So it's like a lot of fixed costs that don't go away even when these crises hit. So that's just kind of a little bit long-winded way of saying that it's just a very, very difficult industry. Keep that in mind. Very difficult, for example, than the industry that Andrew, for example, knows well, which is railroads. In the North American railroad industry, it's I don't want to say it's easy to make money, but it's it's a very, very consolidated industry. The profit margins are extremely, extremely high. Just to give you an example, like a Union Pacific will earn an operating margin on a given quarter of something like 45%. If an airline earns 10%, it's doing a really good job. Like it's that much of a difference. Okay, so now the U.S. I'll just start by saying that just something that was just some new information just released today. Maybe it was yesterday, but anyway, this week, United Airlines actually came out to the stock exchange and they said, hey, look, investors, our revenue is actually coming in better than we expected. We thought it maybe, here we are in September, kids are back in school, the whole summer travel season is over. We thought maybe demand would start to wane a little bit. Well, it hasn't. It's gangbusters still. It's going great. Premium demand, the corporate demand is coming back. It's all, people are still traveling for leisure. They're paying high fares. So it looks very good. Then on the cost side, fuel prices are actually coming down. So that's very helpful. So we're in a situation where things are rather rosy for US airlines right now. Now, it's not it's not utopia by any means. I mean, one of the problems that airlines are having, probably the biggest problem right now, is that they're still not operating to full capacity. So they're not utilizing all their planes, they're not utilizing all their people. And so they're not as efficient as they could be, which, we measure something called unit cost. So what it costs basically to fly one passenger 1 mile. So that's kind of a very standard way of measuring costs in the airline industry. And that's still elevated, still high, because they're not running their assets and their people very efficiently. So again, not perfect, but it is, compared to the last 2 years of, I like to use the Abraham Lincoln quote. What was it? If this is hell, I'm in it, or something like that. I mean, it was hell for 2 years. Sorry, I think I bungled that quote, but you get the point. It was for 2 years, the airline industry was just the worst it ever was. It was really, really a disaster. And now it's just, much different situation. Okay. I'm not going to go through all these points here. They're just more for your reference if you want to read through them or ask about them later. But, specific areas of strength include like premium economy. There's certain markets that are doing really well, like, the leisure markets. Europe is fantastic. US to Europe, US to anything to the Caribbean or Mexico, fantastic. South America, very strong. The only thing that's still kind of not yet back to where it was, or close to where it was, is Northeast Asia. So Japan and China, most importantly. I think even Korea is okay. But yeah, the Japanese market is still, they've been very slow to open their borders. China still hasn't opened their borders. And what everyone will tell you is that it's not a demand thing. It's really just, it's a restriction thing. The minute that the government says, okay, borders open, the demand comes roaring back. Like, doesn't matter what market, doesn't matter. So that'll probably be even the same with China and Japan once they come around to opening. So yeah, that's just a few, a few specific examples of what's happening with demand, but feel free to, follow up about that. But now to sort of the main topic, Spirit Airlines. So let me talk a little bit about Spirit. So Spirit is an airline. It's not a new airline. It's been around for a couple decades now, but only in about, I want to say 2007 or something like, they switched over to what's called an ultra low cost carrier. Some of you may be familiar with like Ryanair or Wizz Air in Europe. They're typical ultra low cost carriers. They kind of pioneered the model. Ryanair certainly did. And it's just it's a model that emphasized almost cost above everything else. You just squeeze the plane with as many seats as you could possibly fit on it. You charge for everything. So it's, you want a bottle of water, you got to pay. You want a seat near a window, you got to pay. You want an extra bag, you got to pay. So it's, just maximize, just lower costs as much as possible, increase revenue as much as possible without raising the base fare. So they want to keep the base fare very low to attract as many people. And frankly, that has been the most successful business model in the airline industry. Now, Spirit is a chief practitioner in the US, and Frontier also was an airline that had a different model, but switched to the ultra low cost business model. And they actually both did so after receiving investment from a company called Indigo Partners. They're just, there is an investment firm that likes to invest in airlines. They've invested in Wizz Air as well. They've invested in an airline in Mexico, an airline in Chile. So they all have this kind of ultra low cost business model that we mentioned. So Spirit and Frontier going into the pandemic were rather successful. They typically earn pretty good profit margins, and then the pandemic hits, and both of them, it devastates everybody in the industry. And all of these airlines really, in order to stay alive and to stay out of bankruptcy, they required a big government bailout. So Washington gave, just this huge, huge package that gave them aid to, here's some money to keep your workers on board and whatnot. So it wasn't, these guys may have been in some ways better off than, the big guys like United, but it wasn't a picnic by any means. It was really tough. So Frontier at some point, thinks to itself, maybe Spirit and I can get together. And, mergers have a nice record in the airline industry of introducing more pricing power and in, resulting in, more profits for kind of everybody in the industry. So Frontier and Spirit thought, maybe this is a good idea. So they get together. And again, they have that common ownership heritage. Not current. Indigo Partners owns Frontier now. They sold out of Spirit. But in any case, they have that common heritage. They also were increasingly competing with each other in Florida. Florida is a market that played a very important role during the pandemic because it was one that stayed rather healthy. We like to call Florida kind of like the endless pit or the endless bucket. It's just there's always, no matter how many planes you put in Florida, you can always fill it. There's always people who want sunshine, particularly in the winter. In March, you can run, I think one person called like a bomber stream of flights down from New York to Florida in the winter. You could always fill the flights. The question is, what kind of price you can get for it. So with consolidation, gives you some more pricing power. So Frontier and Spirit, they, have all this in mind. There's also what I call the 3 Ps, pilots and planes and property, meaning airport gates and things like that. They've all kind of become rather scarce in recent years. So it's kind of a way to, kind of create a pool of these things. So earlier this year, Frontier and Spirit make an announcement that they're going to merge. Okay. All is well until our friend JetBlue comes along. Now, JetBlue, their story is a little bit different. They're not an ultra low cost carrier. Now, when they first started out back in the early 2000s, they really, Spirit didn't exist as an ultra low cost carrier. There was, same thing Frontier, and there was no Allegiant. And so they were kind of, the low cost player. And their main competitor was, they were competing against the big guys, like at the time, US Airways and American, all that, but also Southwest. And they came in right out of the gate. They made really good money. Their kind of bread and butter was flying people from the Northeast down to Florida, New York, Florida. And again, they did that in a way that was, it was cost efficient, but it was also very customer friendly. They, you guys, I don't know how many of you guys flown JetBlue, but it's a nice airline to fly, a little more leg room. They offer snacks and this and that. So they did a real good job. But over time, between cost creep and more competition from the ultra LCCs, they really started to kind of lose their footing a bit. They during the 2010s, and I have a slide on this later, but they certainly made money. All the airlines did fairly well during the 2010s, thanks to consolidation, but they definitely lagged. They were kind of on the bottom end of the chart if you ranked all the airlines by profitability. So it wasn't, they always kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable. More recently, they've just, seen their costs kind of spike. They actually lost money in the second quarter, which, most US airlines made money. So you can see where there's a little bit of discomfort there. Mergers it's not something that just popped into their mind yesterday. So back in 2005, 2006-ish, they actually had this idea of maybe we can merge with Virgin America, which was an airline based in San Francisco. They had a lot of transcontinental routes. JetBlue is also a big transcontinental player. So they figured, hey, maybe we can, get these two together. We can get more slots at these airports like San Francisco and LAX, which are, rather scarce. So, hey, maybe that'd be a good idea. Unfortunately, Alaska Airlines comes along and outbids JetBlue. And they wound up buying Virgin America in 2016. So I think I said 2006, but I meant 2015, 2016. Sorry. But 2016 was the Virgin America Alaska merger. So, and that went pretty well. They had all these mergers, they do have their stumbles. Virgin America had some issues with, they had to retreat a little bit from San Francisco and whatnot. But in general, you ask them and say, oh, we're very happy with how that panned out because, we got more pricing power in a lot of these markets. We got new gates, we got new slots. Our frequent flyer program got more members. And when you have more members, you can make better deals with credit card companies because credit card companies like to offer those miles. So they pay big bucks to the airlines. So for a lot of reasons, these mergers work really well. So JetBlue comes in and says, all right, this time, we're gonna get Spirit. and we're gonna pay more than Frontier. So there was a subsequent bidding war, and JetBlue wound up they were just willing to pay a lot more than Frontier. So they wound up doing a deal. I have a few other kind of points, and I hesitate to go into too much detail here unless you want to ask more about it. But they also, had some Florida issues. They wanted to, establish more commanding presence in Florida. They also kind of were looking for more aircraft orders and more. I mean, one of the problems is like, so they're a big Airbus customer, but Airbus and Boeing for that matter just can't produce enough planes and probably won't be able to over the coming years, to meet demand. There's all sorts of supply you've heard of. I mean, you guys know more than better, with CILTNA, that there's all sorts of supply chain constraints and stuff. So this is affecting the aircraft manufacturers as well. So Spirit has an order of something like 100 aircraft or whatever. So JetBlue can come in and, they get that as well when they buy it. And then, I mentioned the credit card, and JetBlue also has a lot of what they call a vacations package division. So they, they sell flights kind of packaged with hotels and stuff like that. They bring Spirit's people into that, and they, kind of get more market power for that as well. So there's, there's a lot you'll see a lot of news articles. I think when this merger first came out, that like, what the heck is JetBlue doing? JetBlue is not an ultra low cost carrier. That doesn't make any sense. In my humble opinion, I actually think it does. I think I can see the logic. There's always risks in these things. JetBlue's cost will most certainly rise because they're going to actually like tear out, Spirit seats. They're going to bring everything up to the JetBlue standard. They're all the pay, they're going to bring up all the labor rates to JetBlue standard. So the costs are going to rise, but they're just betting that the revenue increases will outweigh that. And frankly, if you look at past mergers, I think there's some, logic to that. I think I don't, discount it. So, that's kind of a little bit of what JetBlue is thinking, but we don't know for sure. And this is important if the deal is actually going to happen, because it still needs to be approved by the Justice Department in the US. And that's far from a slam dunk. And there's certain reasons. I mean, one is that I think the Justice Department under the current Biden administration is somewhat reluctant to approve so many new mergers. I think, over consolidation of industries has been sort of an issue for some economists, that maybe the US economy is not working as well as it should be because companies have too much pricing power. And you'll see airlines kind of being named, when people talk about this issue, they always kind of mention airlines like that. It's maybe it's too consolidated. So, what the Justice Department might say, okay, you can do this, but you got to give up your new alliance with American, which they actually sued JetBlue to stop that. Now that's another story we can, you could ask me questions about, but that's JetBlue is kind of the Justice Department is already kind of breathing down JetBlue's neck. So, we'll see. Now JetBlue is making all kinds of arguments that, hey, look, if we're, right now we're just too small to compete with Southwest. They're just so much bigger than us. If we, combine with Spirit, now that gives us like a, another competitor that can, go in and just really fight hard. And even the big guys like United, Delta, and American will just be much better established more relevant to consumers in many more markets. And JetBlue right now is very East Coast heavy. So now, hey, look, we're going to be bigger on the West Coast, and we're going to offer our, our nice product and our low fares to all the West Coast people too. This is great, isn't it? I don't think JetBlue is doing this to lower fares. Let's put it that way. So we'll see, what ultimately happens here. I just have two more charts you can take a look at. This is just looking at the second quarter of this year. And you can see the ranking. Obviously, I realized before, I'm not a very good Excel sorter apparently, because Spirit, I put JetBlue above Alaska, but Alaska you can see is should be above JetBlue in terms of revenue. I'm looking on the left-hand side, but if you combine JetBlue and Spirit, you start to creep a little bit closer to Southwest, still considerably smaller, but now you're talking, 7 billion to 4 billion, and it gets a little bit closer. Then on the other side, you can see that JetBlue just had like a really bad second quarter. Now they had devised this merger, of course, before this whole idea before the second quarter. So I'm not saying this is responsible for that, but you can see they're sitting there in New York at their headquarters and, like, ooh, this is, we should be doing better than this. Finally, I just have, if you want to take kind of a longer, broader scope, time-wise, this is during the entire decade of the 2000s, so 2000 to 2019. So I added all these numbers up, and you can see American was the largest airline with 406 billion, that's $1 billion in revenues, and JetBlue's down at 60. And then you can see JetBlue, it's not bad. I mean, they did, and my thing is covering, sorry, I don't know if you can actually see the numbers, because I can't, because it's covering up, but
yeah, we can see the numbers on there. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let me just pop that back up then. So you can see that JetBlue, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I can't see them, but JetBlue is like towards the bottom. It's not bad, it's not a bad number. I think it's double digits, right? But yeah, I mean, it's towards the bottom, and you can see how much better Spirit has done.
Yeah, 12%. 12% is
12%.
the JetBlue, Spirit 16 in terms of margin.
There you go. So 4 full points over the course of an entire decade. You can see how kind of a little bit strange that the less profitable airline is buying the more profitable airline. Suppose there's a little bit of a uniqueness to that, but in any case, that's the story. We'll see if it actually happens, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. And again, if you want to keep it informal, if you want to ask me questions about something other than this topic, including baseball, you guys are welcome.
Hey, Jay, listen, thank you for that. Can you just go back to the previous slide? Because I just want to ask you a quick one on this.
I should put this
so,
yes.
There's a huge gap between those big three, American, Delta, United, and then the rest. But big difference with American, Delta, United, they are global airlines. So how much of that revenue there can you just take out because it's all transatlantic and trans-Pacific and South America, business?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Make it comparable.
Yeah. Now, I do want to emphasize one point. Now, I think this is an important point to make. Now, when United flies a flight to, let's say, Newark to Guayaquil, Ecuador, and a lot of the people on that flight are connecting from domestic trips. So these are not, you have to kind of treat these as networks. These are not independent international and domestic, entities. They're kind of all meshed together. So the fact that United even has an Ecuador flight enables them to have a flight to Atlanta and a flight to Chicago, or an additional flight to Chicago, whatever. So I just want to make that point so that they're not separate. And however, you can say that, American and Delta and United, they usually do tell you that, okay, this is what our internationals revenues were, this is what our domestic revenues. And I would say so it's less for American. American is more domestic oriented. Delta and United are more international oriented. But, and I don't have those numbers, I don't want to venture to, and it changes all the time, so I don't, but I would say roughly, I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb to say that, 60% of United's revenue is domestic and 40% international. I don't know, maybe it's more like 50, I'm not sure. So yeah, I think that maybe give you a good, like a rough guideline, a rough answer to your question.
But they'd still be in positions 1, 2, and 3. Anyway, they're still going to be bigger.
Well, no, no. If you just look by domestic passengers, just the number of domestic passengers, Southwest is the largest.
Okay.
So yeah, so you do actually raise a good point there. Southwest is actually the largest, but then United, Delta, and American would be bigger than your JetBlues, and probably even bigger than JetBlue and Spirit combined.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I just thought it was worth keeping that up before we lose the screen, because
and don't forget too, I keep putting extra caveats in here, but Spirit they have a lot of international routes. They're all short haul, but they're they're going to the Caribbean, they're going to Mexico. So JetBlue is flying to London now. It's not a big part of their network yet, but they certainly have a lot of Caribbean stuff. They're flying all the way down to I think they even fly to Ecuador. So
They do. They fly to Ecuador and Colombia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're pretty deep into South America. They don't have the long range planes, the wide bodies, essentially, it's double aisle planes. They don't have those like United Delta American, and for that matter, Hawaiian has as well. But they can't go like all the way to Tokyo, or they can't go all the way to Buenos Aires or something. But yeah, they can go. And what I know I keep running off on a tangent here. I can't stop myself, but there's actually something that's interesting that's happening now is these narrow body planes that are traditionally just sort of short haul oriented. They're getting longer and longer ranges. So this is why like JetBlue is able to use what they call like the A321LR long range. They're able to do that to London. And we're going to see the XLR debut in a couple of years, which is a narrow body plane with extra long range. And that's going to be able to do even kind of deeper routes into, from New York to deeper into Central Europe, let's say, or, deeper into South America. Still not Asia, but like over the Pacific. But yeah, that's an interesting new technology to watch, that we in the airline industry are watching stuff like that very closely. And there's debate whether or not, are these narrow body long haul planes going to be that revolutionary? Are they going to be more just good for a few different airlines? But not, I have an opinion on that, but there's different people say different things.
Jay, if I may, the one thing that, and forgive me, I'm really interested in this, but I know very little, so it's always a dangerous sort of thing. So forgive me if it's a stupid question. I watched the Netflix documentary around Boeing, and I found that really interesting, just from a sort of like a company, almost sort of like, how do you blindly walk into a situation where you lose all your safety cases? And forgive me if other people haven't watched it, this is all about the downfall of Boeing, the airplane manufacturer. And one of the key points that I picked up, and again, this is through the lens of Netflix, so caution what I say, but one of the principal reasons for the downfall was all to do with the merger with McDonnell Douglas, and the focus became very much on stock price. And there tended to be, I got the sense there was a move away from a focus on safety and performance and more about share price and therefore that side of things. So, and sorry, so my related question to this was, I have no understanding as to what fleet is on which sort of carrier. And I didn't know if that sort of was any correlation to the stats that are on here at all, whether it's, I think it's Airbus, isn't it, or Boeing, and forgive me, I don't know the other sort of manufacturers, but yeah. I didn't know if that had an impact at all. I know it was just a piece that I thought maybe there's a tie-in.
Yeah, no, great question. And the answer is there's pretty much no correlation. Not pretty much. There is zero correlation between an Airbus carrier and a Boeing carrier. In fact, the majority of very large carriers fly both Airbus and Boeing planes. American certainly does. Delta certainly does. A little bit more Airbus than Boeing. United certainly does. Southwest is one that's like Boeing only. And they've even kind of thought to themselves, well, maybe this is a little bit, it's a little uncomfortable relying on just one supplier. Now, this is all separate from the safety issues.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that at all. I have no expertise on that. Obviously, there was a very serious issues with Max. So it's,
well, because I recall when we discussed this last time, if I remember rightly, one of the sort of the things that made the Spirit and Frontier merger really appealing was about they had the similar fleet, so therefore the pilot crossover and all that side of things. And again, not knowing what the JetBlue fleet looks like relative to the Spirit fleet, is that something that's still common and therefore have the ability to be assumed? I take it there's a level of commonality there.
Yes, fleet commonality is still very important. It's less important when you get bigger. So the bigger you get, the more it comes to the point where, well, yeah, I can have economies of scale for both aircraft, manufacturers. But absolutely, it's very helpful that JetBlue is pretty much an all Airbus carrier. They do fly some planes from Brazilian manufacturer called Embraer, but those will be gone pretty soon. Yeah. So you can call them an all Airbus operator essentially, and Spirit is very much an all Airbus operator essentially. So yeah, absolutely, they both fly the Airbus narrow bodies, and Frontier too. So yeah, there you go. But I think it's important to emphasize that the economics of these planes they're pretty much all excellent planes. I mean, you can go, model by model, some might be better than others, but, just for an example, like kind of on the wide body end, 787, that is the best, like the most economical. Everybody who has a 787 loves it, especially there's, different variants and whatever. If you have a 787-9, it's the gold standard. But the competing plane by Airbus is still excellent. Now on the narrow body plane, the gold standard right now is the A321, which the A321 Neo, sometimes they call it, they put new engines on it. Anyone who flies that plane, absolutely killer economics. So, they produce good products, some products that are better than others. But in general, it's a duopoly. You have both these manufacturers producing planes that, the airlines want. It gets kind of interesting because, sometimes what happens is, different airlines want different things. So, an Asian airline, for example, might say to Boeing, we want let's say you're building this new aircraft. Let's say, they're talking about building this replacement for the old 767s, wide body aircraft. And an Asian carrier might say, we want you to optimize this to have like a really big cargo hold. Whereas Southwest is like, we don't care about that. We just want
For people, right?
Yeah. We just want Orion Air. They don't.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
They just build something that's like the lowest possible cost. If you have to put the restrooms on the wings, that's okay. Whatever. So different, and that's difficult for Boeing. Boeing and Airbus have to navigate that because they have a lot of good customers. I'd say kind of Ryanair and Southwest are probably Boeing's two best customers. Maybe, some of the wide body operators, certainly American and United are huge Boeing customers. Emirates, and then on the Airbus side, there's Air Asia's been a bit, but you could go through, but they kind of have to juggle different priorities among different customers.
Yeah, sure, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and it would be nice to have more than just a duopoly, but that's where we are.
That's just kind of where it is at the moment, right? With Airbus and Boeing,
maybe the Chinese will enter. They've been talking about that for a long time, but that's don't hold your breath on that, at least anytime soon.
Jay, before you take the next question, do you want to stop sharing your screen and then we can kind of see you in full glory?
I see what I'm doing there. Okay.
You got it. Right.
Jay, let me ask this. By the way, you are in the group. You're in the 50% who have yellow backgrounds tonight.
I'm not feeling so.
So there is some commonality there.
I feel much better now.
My experience is living on American. I think other than a couple of trips to Europe on points, I don't remember the last time I was on a different airline. My brother-in-law and his wife flew from Boston to Dallas, and I think they came down on Spirit and went back on Frontier, the ultra low-cost carriers, and their reaction was never again. What is,
by the way, Arthur, I'm flying Spirit in a couple of weeks, so I'm going.
Well, and my point is I've got no experience with them. But with advanced status on American, you keep your points where they belong. For an average passenger average trip, while Spirit and Frontier, the ultra low cost carriers, tout their low fares, everything else is piecemeal. So for a normal passenger who does not want to fly naked and wear the same clothes for the next 3 weeks, and actually wants to take maybe a suitcase or two, realizes that they're going to have to use the pay toilet on the back of the plane and all of that.
On the wings, right?
Does the actual total transportation cost come to when compared with one of the larger carriers, in advanced purchase? I'm driving more than I fly right now. But I can go from Dallas to Boston with advanced purchase for $500. And granted, I get free checked baggage, but others would have to pay, I think, $25. And everything else is included, seat selection, advanced seat selection, and everything, versus the piecemeal of the ultra low cost carriers. When you compare apples to apples and everything included, how do those two prices really compare for a normal traveler?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the Department of Transportation actually publishes data on fares. So this is something you can look at. And I do look at, and there is still a considerable savings for flying the ultra low cost carriers, even when you account for all the, paying for the paid toilet, whatever. I mean, there obviously it depends on the passenger. If you're someone that just, oh, I need to take 3 bags with me everywhere I go, or I need to, I'm just someone who just needs all the extra conveniences and whatnot, then yes, for some people, it probably doesn't make sense to fly Spirit, just fly American, get your miles. But on average, I mean, the DOT does look at this and they factor in all the charges, they kind of look at what people are paying in total. And there is a considerable savings. I mean, like I said, I have to go down to Dallas for, so Skift, my employer, is hosting an aviation forum in November. And if anybody's interested in coming, you can learn more about this wonderful industry. But I'm flying Spirit down, and I think American back, just because the times work, the fares were a lot lower. The fare was just much lower for the Spirit flight. It's still going to save me money. I'm probably not going to check a bag. I may have to pay for a carry-on fee. But there's not too much more I need. So it is worthwhile. Another, kind of layer of complexity to my answer is that it does, of course, depend on route as well. There are certain routes where if they're not very competitive, and you might see this with the merger, you might see some even ultra, let's say JetBlue merges with Spirit, if that deal is finalized, and suddenly the Orlando to Dallas route is no longer quite as, competitive. Well, then maybe even Frontier, yes, they're an ultra low cost carriers, maybe their fares, start to creep up, and the gap between the, them and let's say American is on that route, maybe that gap narrows. So, it depends on a lot of factors, a lot of routes, a lot of, different things, but you can safely say that the ultra low cost carriers do collect less money on any given route than the big guys.
So if I understood the presentation, as it goes through, JetBlue will be bringing Spirit up to JetBlue standards.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore will most likely raise fares, I would think. And
no question.
And have to
they won't admit that, but
and have to overcome that perception of people wanting to spend $1.98 to go 800 miles. Do you anticipate that the service quality on the former Spirit service is going to improve, and that the fares are going to go up as well, and they'll become maybe a little bit more like a Southwest or one of the mainline carriers?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what it's going to look like is what JetBlue looks like today. So everything that's, that's whatever Spirit is today disappears, and all those planes, seats get ripped out. So they're going to have more leg room. So in that sense, the service is going to be better. There's going to be, the pricing is going to be different. Now I kind of mentioned this in one of my slides. I didn't talk to it though. JetBlue has actually tried to become a little more Spirit-like over the years. They've just kind of recognized that that's a more profitable model. So in 2 areas that come to mind is they do kind of charge what's called these basic economy fares now, where you got the metaphor you use is, you got to pay for the toilet, whatever. There's they do have some of those like unbundled fares. But they didn't go all the way. They kind of, well, we have some of these now if you really want them. And then the other areas, they actually have densified their seating configurations. So the legroom has gone down. Now I forgot, I used to know these numbers, but I can't remember exactly, but like on a given A320, Spirit might have 180 seats. JetBlue maybe used to have 160, now they have 170. I mean, I'm just making those numbers. I think the Spirit numbers, right? Well, anyway, don't pay attention to the exact numbers, but they've kind of crept a little bit towards Spirit without going all the way. So anyway, we're going to get, if this merger goes through, all the Spirit planes start to look exactly like the JetBlue planes. They'll have the in-flight TV screens now. They, the crews are wearing the JetBlue uniforms, all that kind of stuff.
And frankly, on the American A321s, unless even with a Gold for Life status, I'm going to pay extra for a better seat. If I don't do that, I feel like the seat pitch. I'm flying on Spirit on the American.
They do the same thing also.
The American
everybody
321.
Everybody has become more Spirit-like. I mean, they've really kind of moved the industry in that direction.
Would you anticipate this would open up the market for a new entrant as an ultra low cost carrier?
Good question. I think the opportunity for that is there. There are already 2 new entrants that are trying to kind of take advantage of the situation, even as it stands now, because the industry is consolidated even before JetBlue Spirit. One of those airlines is called Avelo. Avelo is run by a guy who used to be the CFO of United. He also used to be the president of Allegiant, which is another ultra low cost carrier. So a lot of, very experienced person, very well respected. And as far as I know, Avelo's doing okay. There's also an airline called Breeze, which interestingly enough, was started by the founder of JetBlue. So he is trying to get back into the game. A little bit of an unusual business model though. They're using kind of smaller planes and this and that, but so there is that opportunity. Now, one of the issues that any startup is going to face is that it's just hard to compete because of the economies of scale. Remember my first slide, the bigger you are, the more powerful you are, and you get all these economies of scope and scale. So it is hard. You just need a lot of capital to have to burn through for the first couple of years before you establish yourself. And we'll see if, the 2 startups and maybe other prospective ones can manage that. The other real issue right now that startups in the past didn't have is that right now it's very hard to get pilots. And if you want pilots, you're going to pay big money for them right now. The pilot market is, I heard someone from the leasing community today called it, like pilot blackmail. They're just, especially like if you're a regional pilot right now, you can, you're living large. I mean, you can ask for whatever you want. So
Jay, just to say on there, the regional pilots were so badly paid before. Yeah, I think it's fair to say absolutely. They're kind of coming up to a living wage in some respects.
Yeah, no, and I think you make a good point. Yeah, I think you make a good point. So yeah, it's no one is crying for the airlines here, but it is a valid point to say that if you're a startup airline right now and you're looking for some pilots on your, you kind of need some sort of labor cost advantage if you're going to compete against a carrier like Southwest, then that's very difficult right now. Also very difficult to get slots at airports. There's been underinvestment in airport infrastructure, arguably. I mean, some airports have been expanding. Where are you going to get an airplane right now? I mean, if you want an A380, you can have one. but that's for those of you maybe new to the industry, that's that big monster giant plane that, is an absolute economic disaster. But, if you want a 737 or an A320, 321, whatever, which is a typical plane that you're going to fly domestically, where are you going to get one? I mean, you can lease one, you're going to pay. The market's really tight right now. What are you going to call Airbus and say, give me a new one? They're going to tell you, oh yeah, you can go to the back of the line. You wait 5 years from now, unless you want to pay like huge premium, you probably still can't even get it really soon. So, if you look at some of the, so Ryanair is probably the most profitable airline in the world over the last 10 years or so. And one of the reasons for that, big reason, there's many reasons, but a big reason is that they just have an extremely sweetheart deal with Boeing. And the reason why they were able to get that is, so Ryanair, this guy, Michael O'Leary, some of you may know, he's a character. And every time there's a crisis in the industry, he calls Boeing up and he says, okay, you guys are screwed. You can't sell airplanes right now. You're going to have to lay off workers. You're going to have to like stop your assembly lines. So yeah, give me like a really, really good discount. Sell me some planes. This way, at least you can keep your assembly lines moving, keep your, you don't have to lay off your people. So they just get these really great deals. And they can do that because they just have this tremendous balance sheet. Even during crisis time, they're always profitable because they just have, so it's like, and it's a cycle, during like right now, Ryanair is just doing great.
They are the worst airline to fly with, though. Like
they're horrible to fly. Yeah, and it's almost like
it's
almost like the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's almost like the same thing with Spirit. There seems to be an inverse correlation between quality and profitability.
Well, you get but price. You get what you pay for. And,
you pay less. So maybe, Arthur, if you're thinking about starting up an airline, maybe just make it really, really bad for the customer.
I'll tell you a story. Trying to hire bus drivers.
So Jay, we've probably got time for one more question. I just kind of open up if anybody else got a last one for Jay. Okay, well, I've got one, because in terms of, one of the things I was just going to make a comment is one of the big winners of this could be Frontier, because they become the only ultra low cost carrier of any scale, and because what JetBlue has taken out is their main competitor, which is Spirit, out of the market.
Ironic, really, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but makes me wonder if that was their plan all along. But my question for you is: so you said that this might not even happen. There's a lot of hurdles to get over. What's going to happen to Spirit's business now? Because I've been in a company that's been subject to a takeover before, and you get complete stasis. Nobody wants to invest in anything. Strategy kind of goes to the wall. They're a very profitable airline. And, that's through a lot of innovation. They have good people, the good ideas. I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, is that business going to start to kind of, get a little bit lackadaisical, kind of start to lose people because of the uncertainty? I mean, is that actually going to be an issue for them?
And it could, we're talking years. That could be 2 years before they get, a Justice Department. Who knows? Maybe faster than that. Of course, Spirit will tell you, their management will say this is business as usual. And there are examples of, Andrew, in the railroad industry right now, Kansas City Southern is, their merger with Canadian Pacific isn't approved yet, but they're still, they're running business as usual. And that's what Spirit would tell you. But you raise the right question, and maybe management does kind of lose focus, or hey, we're not going to be around anyway, so what do we? So yeah, I mean, it's possibly it's a possible risk, I think.
Well, because they're more profitable than JetBlue. They're doing things right, and all of a sudden they're kind of just going to have the legs taken away from them, because it won't exist anymore. There won't be a Spirit. It'll be a bigger JetBlue. And
right now, before they get the Justice Department consent, they still will be, JetBlue is like not allowed to cooperate with them. There's certain things they can do, they can talk to each other, but they're not allowed to coordinate pricing for sure. They're not allowed to say, hey, Spirit, why don't you drop that Orlando JFK route, because that's you can't do that until you get clearance for the merger. So Spirit will still do its own thing, and they have a fiduciary duty. They still have their own shareholders and stuff. So I don't anticipate it being a huge problem, but I think it's a fair question to ask.
I wouldn't be opening new stations in new countries and things like that, because might not be there in 18 months. And
that's a valid point you make.
Okay, right. Well, so Jay, we went slightly over time, but that's traditional with this forum. Thank you so much indeed for taking the time to pull all that together, talk it through so eloquently for us, and then kind of answer all the questions that we've been firing at you. And I'm sure we have lots more. We'll have to just get you on again. Maybe we just do a general airline session in the future.
My pleasure. And thanks all for you guys for attending. And just definitely email me, js@skift.com. And yeah, if you're interested in subscribing, I you know, the sales folks at Skift are going to shoot me if I don't say this. So if you're interested in subscribing, please look into it. We do have a lot of, yeah, it's great stuff we're talking about now is the stuff we write about. So a lot of good stuff in Airline Weekly each week. And I think in that presentation, there's a discount code as well. But that aside, yeah, just always feel free to email me. You know, you could probably tell I kind of like talking about airlines. So if you have any questions or just, you know, want to converse about them, always my pleasure.
We really appreciate it, and thank you. And if you're okay, I'll share your slides with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing, I'll do a plug for you as well. Jay is also the publisher of Railroad Weekly. That's a relatively recent kind of endeavor last year, and I have to say it is an excellent publication. So, you know, for someone who's kind of started in that new industry sector, it's really kind of making its mark. So I'd also recommend anybody kind of takes a look at that as well. So Jay,
and remember, I like to talk baseball too. If anybody's
well, I have no. Is that like
I don't have a newsletter about it, but
is that cricket for girls or something? Okay, right. It's time to go. Thank you very much indeed, Jay. I'm going to switch off the record, and we'll see everybody in a month's time. So
Thank you all.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
everyone. Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye.